talking about time. Like, what is time, and does our understanding of time shift when we really apply these revolutionary concepts that we're learning? And also, what is trauma, and what's the relationship between time and trauma? As we lean into the revolution, what are the new opportunities for healing trauma, and how do we get there? So, the passage of time on Earth is noticed in aging, growing, the changing of seasons, the change from night to day, and the phases of the moon. And it would be terribly convenient if each cycle fit within a larger cycle at nice, tidy intervals. We love tidy intervals. It seems like it's intrinsically appealing to us, like a simple ratio, like a frequency of 2 to 1 or 3 to 2 is very deeply appealing. The ratio of 3 to 2, this is a fifth in music. And that's very, very appealing to us. That's like intrinsically lovely. The ratio of 2 to 1 is an octave. We build systems of aesthetics around simple frequency ratios. But the number of hours in a day, or days in a month, or months in a year doesn't give us those perfect, consistent ratios. There's about 24 hours in a day and about 12 months in a year, but it doesn't line up perfectly. Or rather, it does, depending on your definition of perfect and how far you're willing to zoom out. We need to zoom out so much further in order to even begin to comprehend the relationships between the cycles that we experience here on Earth, let alone begin to appreciate the beauty in them. And something that can't be fathomed at the level of scale of one lifetime, of one person, at the level of me, is hard to understand. And it's hard to appreciate. And it's hard to care. So we're working with a functionally inconvenient reality. And for our purposes, we would like to make it convenient. So we made calendars. And calendars are to time like language is to knowing. Calendars and language, they describe the thing itself in a way that abstracts it and simplifies it for the benefit of a shared understanding. But that's not the same thing as the thing itself. So calendars and clocks, they describe time in a socially operable way, like it helps us to show up to the Feast of Ingathering at the right time, or it helps us to know when to plant crops. And what's important in whatever social context the description is shared in really changes the definition of what is socially operable. What we as a society care about, whatever the society is, that informs how we describe time. So that informs how we create our calendars to be. So for our convenience, we've for a long time now, we've been really trying to make a comprehensible, simple, if possible, relationship between the cycles of the moon and the cycle of the sun. It takes 29.53 days, which a day is an Earth's rotation. It takes 29 and a half of those about for the moon to go through the synodic cycle. And the synodic cycle of the moon is the waxing and the waning, the full moon, the new moon. It takes 29.53 ... days for that to go through its cycle. So we call it about 30 days. So we have about 30 days in a month. And it takes the moon 12.37 ... cycles through its phases. So that's like 12.37 times through its phase cycles in order to return to the same point in the seasons, which is the solar year. So that's the solar cycle. So, we rounded up last time. We rounded 29.53 up to 30 days in a month. So it takes a little bit more than 12 months to go through a solar cycle. So let's round down this time, and now we'll call it an even 12. And if we went by the moon phases alone, if we had 12 months, so 12 lunar cycles, 12 full moons in a year, then a year would be 354 days. But we can't really do that because that's not going to line up with the seasons. We're going to start calling springtime in the middle of winter. Then we're going to call it in the fall, like that's not going to work for us. And then even when we zoom out, there's a 19-year cycle called the Metonic cycle where the sun and the moon do line up. But when you study enough of those, you start to see a drift in that too. So that indicates that there's yet another larger relationship at work that's still unseen. It doesn't line up conveniently. And this has been frustrating humans for millennia because telling the spiral it's a circle doesn't make it behave like a circle, and rounding up and rounding down is not going to turn the spiral into a circle. So we can get it close, but it's off. It's off just a little bit, and over time, those margins of error add up. And we've come up with a myriad of ways to make up for those little hiccups. So the addition of a day every 4 years, that's leap day. And this is an example of intercalation. And that's not the only example of intercalation. The ancient Egyptian calendar was composed of 12 30-day months, and they added 5 extra days at the end of the year. This has been going on for a long time. In the Chinese lunisolar calendar, they're trying to balance the moon and the sun. They're working with both of them. And they add an extra month every 3 years. In the Vikrami and Hebrew calendars, a month is added once every 3 years or so. And they try to follow the moon's 19-year Metonic cycle. Islam uses a lunar calendar, which has a 30-year cycle in which 11 of those have an extra day added to the month. There's a lot, there's a lot of ways around the world and throughout time that humans have used intercalation to try to make some kind of a consistent calendar make sense. But none of those other calendars that I mentioned have really swept the globe in recent history like the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar was only introduced in 1582 by Pope Gregory, and it wasn't until 1752 that England adopted it. And then after that, via colonialism, it really took over. The switch to the Gregorian calendar and the introduction of a leap day every 4 years marks the end of an attempt to line up the solar year with the lunar months. It's just the sun now. It's not a perfect fit. The moon and the sun really don't line up in a very convenient way, so we've stopped trying to make sense of it. We've accepted that at this point, when it comes to time, we're really only interested in the sun. And I just want to take a moment here. Like, I'm not saying that it's easy to consider these complex interactions between the sun and the moon and make a calendar system that universally makes sense, that everybody can live by. Like, that's notoriously challenging. And I don't have a solution, but I just want to put this out there. Like, what do you think it does to a people to exclusively focus on the solar cycle and relegate what's happening in the lunar months to irrelevancy? Just want to think about that. That's what we're living in. That's part of the paradigm that we're living in. And this became our paradigm via colonialism. That's how it spread around the world. So that's the calendar kerfuffle. And calendars and clocks describe our relationship with time. And that relationship and how it's described certainly impacts our experience, our lived experience of time, our understanding of what time is. Because as we know, our beliefs inform our reality, our worldview is what makes our world. But even so, how we describe time is not the same thing as time. Even though it is heavily weighted when it comes to our own experience of time, how we use calendars and clocks informs our experience of time. But it's not the same thing as time itself. So, what is time? This is really hard to address because in order to talk about it, we'd have to use language, and we are so mired in the somewhat arbitrary, although infinitely considered, made up world of clocks and calendars that it's hard to even fathom beyond that. But this is exactly what we're here for. So let's put on our revolutionary hats and tune into our wisdom and reach into the void of the unknown and practice expressing and attending to some vibe. When we apply the revolutionary concepts and moreover, listen to our own wisdom and our own experiences in these revolutionary times, is the idea that all time is now. Time in a linear sense, with like beginning, middle, and end, when we really lean into these revolutionary principles that everything is interconnected, everything is happening all at once. This string of past and future, that's a made up thing. Stuff is happening now, and it has always been happening now. Also, time, it's moving. Time is changing. So it's not static now. It's this undulating nowness, but it's continuous. So any kind of like demarcation of yesterday versus today is ultimately arbitrary. Also, time is a dimension, which I'm going to get into a little bit more in the next slide. And these days, we talked about this. It's like time seems flexible and it seems malleable. And time scarcity, there's not enough time to do things. That's the old paradigm, because when all time is now and we're connected to all resource, we have what we need. So time scarcity and any scarcity, it's like that's got to be the old paradigm. Any kind of motivation that time scarcity propels, I feel suspicious of that. Like again, it's like I don't know, and I don't know the alternative, but I know how like time scarcity makes me feel. It's like I feel like I'm not enough. I feel like I don't have enough. I feel like there's a way for me to like be kicked out of this one body that we are. And that's false. Like I belong here and I'm okay. So I get suspicious of any kind of time scarcity. Another point about time that has come up for me is that time, our conception of time with like beginning, middle, and end functions to teach us cause and effect. If you push over the glass, the floor gets wet. So the reason why we might want to, why it would be beneficial to have an understanding of cause and effect is because we're powerful and we create our reality. And it apparently is taking a lot of doing for us to realize that as individuals and as the collective individual. It's taking us a lot of time It's taking us a lot of waging war and killing each other. It's taking us a lot of pushing the glass off the table and seeing that the floor is wet to realize how powerful we are and what an impact we make. Also, time as we conceive of it, it's change. It's like that fluctuating, ever-changing instant, and also memory, because we remember what it was like before. It like creates this line, but the line isn't necessarily there. It's just that we remember a different phase of a change. You know, it's like it's a cycle. We remember a different phase. So that can appear as time. Also, time is relative. One of my favorite examples of this is the fireweed plant in Alaska. At the beginning of the summer, it blooms at the bottom of the stem. And as it goes throughout the summer, the blooms go higher and higher up the stem. And at the very end of the summer, the last bloom dies at the top, just like fire climbs upwards. And for the fireweed, that summer is its entire lifetime. And I would just have to imagine that fireweed has everything that goes into a lifetime, all of the loss and the drama and the excitement just in a summertime. So time is relative, and it's kind of relative to size. You know, then you think about like the experience of time if you were the planet Neptune. And I think that that would be different too. So these are just like a smattering of ideas. And again, the truth is within you. So when we're talking about time as a dimension, this is an idea, a point, a one-dimensional point is just an intersection of a line, which is just an intersection of a plane, which is just a cross-section of a three-dimensional object, which it stands to reason, you with me here? It stands to reason that a three-dimensional object, like our three-dimensional experience, is just an intersection of time. And I don't know how to depict that in a diagram. Like, I don't really know how to make sense of that, but I think that there's something to it. And I suspect with respect to how much mobility we feel we have with respect to time, we might be living in like a past, present, future, inevitable marching forward kind of a way that might be as limited as like we're just living in a world that's a flat plane living on X and Y dimensions, because we never thought that we could go up. We never even bothered to consider the Z dimension. But I think it's reasonable that we exist unbounded. I think it's reasonable. We'll see what comes up. Like, we don't know. We're walking into the unknown. But I think it's reasonable that some of these things might start making more sense. Now, trauma. You know what trauma is because you're a human being and you've been there. Living life, life will bring you trauma. And trauma is a personally overwhelming experience, meaning that in that moment of time, our perception of our resources are insufficient to handle the perception of the threat. And everyone's appraisal of their resources and their appraisal of the threat is unique. There's no right and wrong here. There's no absolutes. It's very, very individual. But this sense of deep unsafety creates a knot in the emotional energy from that specific time, which can be held in continuance or in reoccurrence when it's triggered by something that is in some ways similar to the original threat. Time loops in some ways, and we feel like we're right back there again. We're afraid, we're out of resource, and our body responds to that belief by elevating our heart rate, increasing our blood pressure, narrowing our vision. These are the symptoms of anxiety. And that's the body in preparation for whatever it has to do to survive an unsafe situation. And neuroscientifically, what's happening in our brain is the neural pathways that are activated in a traumatic situation get reactivated when we're triggered. And when we're really living in that past moment, which we're doing in a trauma response, that takes our power because it takes us out of the present. And the specific neural pathways in our brain that gets activated in a trauma response pattern becomes a superhighway, like we're practicing it. We're practicing it over and over again. We're practicing jumping into that wormhole to the past over and over again. Because what fires together in our brain, those neurons that fire together, wire together. So that becomes a superhighway. It has gravity. We keep slipping into these wormholes that loop us back into time and keep us out of our place of power, which is in the present moment. In the beginning, when we were tuning into that wise self in the heart, that self exists in the present moment. Our power is in the present moment. So the news is an antivitamin because it shrinks our energy, it keeps us distracted, and it keeps us afraid. And the way that our brains work, when something is emotionally intense, it turns up the volume. So it expedites that wire together kind of a thing. But neuroplasticity is a thing. And we can unlearn those patterns. We can unlearn just jumping into that rabbit hole every time. But it's tough. It's so tough. We know the experience of trauma because we've lived it. Like we know that prison of feeling stuck in that helplessness and the loneliness of fear. And just like everything in nature, things that happen at the individual, relatable scale of the self are also applicable at large levels of scale, in groups of people, and in the collective body as well. So we know a little bit about our personal experience with trauma. We know a little bit about how that ties us into time in a way that keeps us out of our power. And we know that we can heal from our own trauma because we know that neuroplasticity is a thing, and we know that we can cultivate safety. We can cultivate new neural connections that make new highways. But can we retain this deep level of personal embodied knowing and zoom out a little bit? Because February, right now, where we are, this is also the same month that the Salem witch trials took place. And 25 people died during the Salem witch trials. And this event is regarded by popular culture as a tragedy, a mystery, and a marvel that humanity could be so governed by fear and herd mentality. But what about spiritual cultures throughout history who have embraced nature and embraced our inherent power, embraced ancestor energy, and the balance of both creation and destruction? What about those cultures where that has been a part of their spiritual practice, just like we're doing tonight? Throughout the 1400s and the 1700s in Europe, men and women, but 80% women, were hunted, tortured, and killed for practicing herbal medicine, midwifery, or for simply not having children. And February is also Black History Month. And in the United States, the Caribbean people brought over from Africa, enslaved, also brought over spiritual beliefs, which were roundly regarded by their captors as devil worship, and spiritual genocide became a feature of the spread of colonialism throughout those centuries and was used to justify unspeakable cruelty. So this trauma that we know personally has certainly impacted our collective body. And the impact of a loss of a life is a deep wound, but the systematic stigmatization of connecting to nature, the stigmatization of connecting to our ancestors, and connecting to the role that darkness and destruction play in the exquisite balance of creation, and awareness of the humble truth of recognizing our inherent power, the stigmatization of all of that is globally and generationally devastating. We stand here tonight at the Feast of Ingathering on the shoulders of so many who have come before, who have suffered torture and trauma and death for holding these beliefs that we're trying to reclaim. And it's not so easy, is it? It's not so easy. We keep on slipping, we keep on slipping back to these old paradigms. Maybe this is part of why. Like, this is a sobering look at our history, and looking at it all through the perspective of how we're all connected and how our collective history is rife with trauma around these kinds of ideas that we're sharing here tonight. And also from the perspective of time and trauma and that neural gravity that knits us to the past, like this helps to explain why it can be so difficult to claim these revolutionary truths of our connection with nature, of our inherent power. Throughout history, many of us would be killed for a lot of the things that we're saying today. In the past, in the present, many places around the world, these powerful truths have been silenced, and we've kept these truths quiet through the generations for survival. So we honor all of those who came before us, and we drink deep from the waters of truth to begin to fathom how to rise strong from the trauma of the past in the truth of our togetherness. It's so hard to find a way forward from a traumatized state, because when we're in a traumatized state, we're out of the present moment and we're not in our power. And the way forward is unknown, and it can feel really heavy. And some of the things that we're talking about are hard to face. But what I know about the revolution, it's like there's nothing that benefits from hiding, because we're part of one body. Like, every part of us is part of this creature that is us. It's us. This collective body is us. We're so used to the old paradigm where guilt and shame keep us hiding and keep us hidden from each other and from ourselves. But whatever is coming up, no matter how scary it seems, I think it needs to be seen. And I think it needs to be seen in light, which is tricky, because when these things come up, we slip into that trauma pattern and we go back into the wormhole. So what I mean by seen in light is brought into that energy where we know that we have power, where we know that we're all in this together, brought into a supportive circle like this, where we can acknowledge that we are all one. I believe that healing happens in light, in the light of truth. And I believe that all healing is possible. And I also think that time is relevant here too. I think that healing happens now. I think it happens in the present moment. And I also think, from a fractal perspective, that healing on an individual level is directly relevant to healing on the collective level. And I also suspect, and this is me like reaching into the void here, like, I suspect that we can do collective healing at an individual level, because like we are this collective body, and everything is reflected fractally. And I also think that it happens together. Like I think that participating together in healing, because we can't just heal the people that we like and leave the others out. We can't just heal the perceived victims and exile the perceived guilty ones. We can't include some and exclude others, because our healing means our togetherness. Like that's part of the light of truth. It is our togetherness. It's important to take the time to see everyone's pain in the light of truth, not in deepening guilt or in defensiveness or in stalwart individualism or in pity. Like now is the time, like this, the present moment is the time to take everyone's worth seriously and act like we believe it. Like my healing and your healing, our healing, I think it depends on it, because the reality we share is created by those beliefs. And that's just honest.